In the second half of Epitaphs, good Alpha makes a deal with evil Alpha to stop fighting him, and in exchange he'll let the monster come out and hack up wielders. By the time the group makes it to Tucson, however, evil Alpha gets greedy and insists on killing survivors too. When good Alpha complains, evil Alpha blackmails him by threatening Trevor, who good Alpha loves. Good Alpha can't take the risk, so he complies. Meanwhile, Boy Ivy and Trevor discover a survivor who has an idea where Echo is. She's around and leaves graffiti to indicate her next location, which shows up on their truck, so Trevor and Alpha gear up to go looking for her. Trevor gets Blonde Ivy to modify the wielder's device to turn butchers and wielders into passive dolls, so he doesn't have to use lethal force anymore. Boy Ivy and Blonde Ivy talk about that, and how they could have saved Girl Ivy if they'd had that before. Boy Ivy says it wouldn't have saved her because it wouldn't have imprinted her mind, and Boy Ivy was attracted to her mind as much as or more than her body. Blonde Ivy takes this as flirting and kisses Boy Ivy. However, Boy Ivy has no attraction to Blonde Ivy, causing Blonde Ivy to get upset because they have the same mind, so it must be the body that's the problem. Boy Ivy asks, "So why are you mad at me?" Blonde Ivy says, "We have the same brain, you figure it out." Boy Ivy looks skyward and says, "Girls." Okay, so first of all, Boy Ivy is now treated as a male character and without any dissonance. While the gender identity of Wendell Ivy is unclear, Boy Ivy seems to have grown into the masculine role and identity. This makes a certain sort of sense by Dollhouse physics, as the body's soul is supposed to exert influence on the imprints. This exchange pokes fun at gender stereotypes, while at the same time playing them straight in a scene primarily to emphasize the weirdness of Dollhouse identity issues, similar to the scene between Ivy 1.0 and the racist Sierra in Vows. Boy Ivy muses that when he as Ivy 1.0 previously thought about becoming a boy, she thought that she could be the kind of boy she wanted to be with as a girl. Upon becoming a boy, however, he has found that he is physically built to now think about sex constantly. While it deals in stereotypes, the scene's primary purpose ends up feminist for promoting the acceptance of different kinds of people across the gender lines. Meanwhile, Zone goes off alone in an improbable mission to take down the radio tower. It's too well defended though, and he decides to go down in a blaze of glory against butchers. But Griff and Mag rescue him. Mag and Zone have a conversation about the morality of killing butchers, echoing those held by the other team, but while Trevor continues to seek out pacifistic ways of dealing with them, Mag and Zone agree that the butchers are essentially the Walking Dead, and therefore there's no moral value to killing them. Alpha and Trevor follow the graffiti to a Dollhouse display, but instead of Echo, they're ambushed by Ballard, who's angry at Alpha for attacking him in a love supreme. Ballard was protecting Echo by sending Alpha off in the wrong direction. Trevor tries to defend Alpha, saying that he's changed, that he's not evil anymore, but Ballard's seen the bodies of evil Alpha's current victims. Good Alpha defends letting the monster come out in order to accomplish the greater mission of defeating Rossum, and Trevor runs away in shock. Ballard knocks out Alpha. Trevor locks himself in a house with the butcher he wiped. He wants to protect the guy from the butchers and Alpha. He half wants to wipe the butchers outside, but he knows that they would then become defenseless targets too. He holds to these pacifistic values that remind Alpha of Echo, but I'm pretty sure he's the most moral person on the planet right now. It takes a certain degree of power yourself to be so merciful, and he's the only powerful person who's avoided corruption. Ballard interrogates Alpha, thinking that Alpha's stalking Echo again. Alpha denies it and says he's working with Ivy and they want to make the vaccine together, but Ballard doesn't believe him because he knows Ivy, as in Ivy 1.0, is in Tokyo, Japan. Alpha says he knows Ballard won't kill him because the Ballard inside him was what allowed him to turn good. Fortunately, an Ivy radios him and Ballard allows the two Ivies to come check him out. They determine that Alpha is safe, but Ballard insists on at least keeping his hands tied. Alpha asks Blonde Ivy to look after Trevor. Trevor's at first afraid that Alpha sent her to kill him, but she explains what's going on. Trevor feels responsible for Alpha losing control because his going after Girl Ivy was what led to evil Alpha coming out. Meanwhile, Ballard indicates that Echo is in danger. He takes Boy Ivy and Alpha to the edge of Neuropolis, which looks a lot bigger than it does in the future. And he explains that Echo went in there alone 3 days prior to steal Rossum Tech and hasn't come out. Ballard wants to go rescue her, but he isn't powerful enough to go in by himself. He wants Alpha to come with him, while Alpha wants to go in alone. Ballard doesn't trust him, but Alpha doesn't think he could even get in with Ballard slowing him down. Trevor shows up and volunteers to go in with Alpha. He's strong enough to keep up, and he has the wielder tech to keep Alpha in line. He loves Alpha as the father figure, but he's willing to wipe him if it comes to that. Similar to Angel's friends being willing to kill Angelus, but with an added bit of heartbreaking because of Alpha and Trevor's close relationship. Trevor leaves the wiped guy with the Ivies to take care of. By this point, Trevor is certain that wiped people retain their essential characteristics, and that there must be some way to get them back to normal. He He thinks that the only reason Alpha's so determined to believe that you can erase a soul is because he hates his soul and wants to believe that he can defeat evil Alpha forever. But as evil Alpha has come back, that gives hope to the possibility of restoring everyone else. Of course, that also gives legitimacy to Adele's worry that turning Alpha back into Carl William Kraft would bring back his serial killer side. Yeah. So they enter the rubble surrounding Neuropolis. Alpha falls into a hole, and Trevor falls in while trying to save him, where they encounter Echo on her way out. Alpha indicates that they're on her side, and she accepts that as wielders close in. So this whole plot about rescuing Echo really isn't a damsel-in-distress plot. Echo is just as capable as Alpha and Trevor are individually. She manages to get out of Neuropolis on her own, and while she's grateful for the assistance in fighting the wielders, it's not set up as the brave guys needing to assist the poor helpless female like a real damsel plot. It's just friends help each other out.
Yes, they do.
Meanwhile, Mag wakes Zone to tell him that Griff has gathered a whole bunch of survivors, and they're going to take down the tower together. Most of these survivors are men, which makes sense, so I'm not complaining, and at least 3 of them are women too, including Lynn from Epitaph 1. One female survivor is visually interesting, with the bow and arrow, and there's no sexualization, which is pretty cool. As soon as night falls, they advance on the tower strategically, with the action cutting back and forth from these characters in Hollywood to the other characters in Tucson. Echo has a bag full of the imprint-blocking drug, which Rossum is producing as a weapon. If they give it to the wielders, butchers, and other such characters, it will permanently lock them in such states. Fortunately, Echo also has a drive containing the only information on how to make the drug, which is why the wielders are after her with a vengeance. Echo's group gets cornered and they start to consider defeat when Ballard shows up to rescue them. Again, there are no negative implications on Echo's capabilities. They're just 3 powerful warriors who got overpowered by an army of wielders and needed some help from another friend.
Friends help each other out.
As they run away from the army, the Ivies work on hacking the wielders' imprinting signal. They decide to call the radio stations to try to get people to route them in. They call the Hollywood station just as Mag and Zone set up explosives inside it. Though Zone assumes that the ringing phone is another attempt to imprint them, Mag reasons that if the wielders are using radio, it doesn't make sense for Rossum to use the phone anymore. She takes a risk and answers it. Blonde Ivy explains what she needs to do to stop the wielders. Zone doesn't trust anything to do with tech and he's completely prepared to kill Mag. She talks him down and then helps the Ivies connect. Meanwhile, Echo's group locks themselves inside the truck. Wielders surround them and start bashing the walls in. Alpha lets his monster out to play and buys some time by slashing up the wielders. But they overcome even him and are about to kill him when the signal goes out. All the wielders get wiped. Just before Rossum knocks out the signal, Blonde Ivy tries to tell Mag to come to the mountains to find Safe Haven. She breaks up, however, and Mag thinks that there's a place literally called Safe Haven, which is where that rumor comes from. After blowing the tower, Mag gathers Griff, Lynn, and Zone to go search for Safe Haven. Zone asks her how she can have such faith in humanity, and she says it's because she refuses to believe that they're the only ones fighting back. Echo indicates she'll be heading back into Neuropolis to fight Rossum. Ballard wants to go with her, but she says that they can't be together until after the war is won. She gives him the drive and tells him to keep it safe by staying away from her. Alpha, recognizing he's in a dangerous state, runs away from his friends. Trevor feels bad about not having fought by his side. Echo gives him a pep talk, saying that the reason Alpha gave him tech head powers was to make him stronger than Alpha, so he could carry on when Alpha couldn't handle it anymore. She asks him to come with her into Neuropolis, and he does, honored that the great Echo wants him. Together, they climb up over the wall and see that Neuropolis is actually a giant dollhouse. The Epitaph series ends with this cliffhanger. Unfortunately, the inherent problem with introducing a cool new character who fights along Echo is that his absence in Epitaph 2 implies that he's dead by then. Either that or he turns into the token black techhead who gets no lines, and goes along with the attempts to kill Topher and everything. My general impression of Epitaphs is that it's good, continuing the feminism of the main show, if with a few problematic areas. The women aren't drawn unrealistically or shown in unrealistic clothing. If you're turned on by any of these women, it's because you're attracted to women and these are realistic female characters, not because they're particularly sexualized at all. The women aren't shoved in auxiliary roles either. A common thing you'll see is a story in which something like fighting capacity is given tremendous value, and then all the men are given warrior status, elevating them by default, while the women are given undervalued roles, like medical assistants or some form of distant authority that doesn't give the characters the respect of being in the field fighting alongside the men. Epitaphs averts this entirely, as all jobs are valued. Enough of the women wield weapons, but even those who may serve as the brains or the medic are appreciated for contributing services of value. The focus of Epitaphs is definitely on the men. Despite what the cover indicates, the stars of the graphic novel are Alpha, Trevor, and Zone, with the Ivies, Mag, and Echo as supporting characters, along with Griff and Ballard. I don't, however, see this as a bad thing. Echo got enough focus in the main story, and this side story allows side characters to be fleshed out a bit. Even if they're not the focus, the female characters are treated well, and I think that's the important part. While not authored by Joss Whedon, he has given Epitaphs his blessing, and said that the comics are to be counted as Dollhouse canon. This means that there are some retcons in place, but not in a problematic way. Even as a collection of supporting characters, Ivy is actually given far more of a focus in Epitaphs than in the main show, allowing what is essentially Topher's lackey to become a real character in her own right. I see this as possibly due to Marissa Tancherone having more of an influence in the story, given that she was the one to complain about Asian characters being forced into small, stereotypical roles in Dr. Horrible's commentary musical.
Nobody's Asian in the movies, nobody's Asian on TV. If there is a part there for us, it's the groupie in the chorus, that's me.
Though of course, because Ivy doesn't imprint on an Asian person, the character does not gain prominence as an Asian woman. Though there are problems, the story is basically feminist, and arguably more so than most graphic novels out there.